and thank you for joining us for our 3 p.m. session, Growing Your Business With or Without Capital with Ms. Savitra Wilson. Savitra is the founder and CEO of the New Orleans-based technology startup Vizilia, and she also has a second office in New York. This company was founded in 2016 to revolutionize how nonprofits are created and maintained and how enterprises, think cities, private foundations, and corporations, get to date. She is also the founder of Solid Gold Innovations, LLC, her first company, which was a strategic communications agency, and she's the author of Solid Ground, How I Built a 7-Figure Company at 22 with Zero Capital. In 2019, Vizilia was named to VentureBeat's top startups to watch out for in 2019, and also was named to Inc. magazine's 100 female founders building world-changing companies, and also the PitchBook 27 leading Black founders and investors list. She is also a 2010 recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize for Public Service, the Jefferson Award, and her work was featured in the U.S. Senate report to the White House on volunteerism in the United States. Her book, Solid Ground, spent 6 weeks at #1 on Amazon in the startup category. Savitra's work and that of her clients has been featured in national publications such as USA Today, Time Magazine, and CNN. She serves as a voice for communities as a Forbes contributor and has amassed over 200,000 followers across social media with over 3 monthly impressions from readers and followers. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Ms. Savitra Wilson.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So today I'm going to present.
Turn my video off.
I'm going to present really and talk a little bit more about my journey raising capital. I have a presentation here, so I will share my screen and get started. Hopefully everyone can see my first slide here. And so I'm really, again, excited about being able to present to everyone who is joining us today on this call. I've already had the opportunity to be introduced, but the focus for today will be growing your business with or without capital. As was previously mentioned, I have been on both sides. So I have bootstrapped a company to 7 figures and would have gone beyond had I not pivoted into the tech space without zero capital. And then I've also raised now $11 million in venture capital for my second company. And so you have heard my bio, but certain things that really stand out for me about myself, and I wanted to share with you all. So I'm a first generation college student. I come from a rural area about 45 minutes outside of New Orleans. There I grew up with a huge, large family. My mother, father, neither of them actually attended college. And so my siblings and I were the first to go to college. My parents are both deceased. And so when my parents passed away, my father when I was 8 years old, my mother when I had just graduated for undergrad, they left zero inheritance. They actually did the opposite. My mom left my brother and I a debt related to our family home. And at 22, we were trying to pay off a mortgage, right? Before we even had our own mortgage for a home that we wanted. And so it made me think about finances, and it made me think about what I wanted to achieve and accomplish, and what I wanted for my family, right? To not have to leave them with debt once I pass. As I mentioned, I'm from a small rural town by way of New Orleans. My father is from where I grew up, Hammond, Louisiana. My mom is from New Orleans. I'm based in New Orleans, although before COVID, I split my time between here and New York, where we have a second office. I'm a solo founder. And so a good friend of mine referred to me as like the antithesis for a business owner. I'm Black, I'm a solo founder, I'm a woman, and then I'm also from the South building a business. And so for me, coming into entrepreneurship, was definitely not an easy feat. It still does not remain an easy feat today. As I mentioned, I bootstrapped my first company to 22, at 22 to 7 figures, and then I raised 10.5 million in venture capital for my second company, one of the largest enterprise Series A raises for an African-American female founder. And so as I want to talk about scaling your business, right? So we think about ways that we have to scale our business. As a founder, most people feel that scale is associated with having to raise capital. But I know that that does not always have to be the the case. The two biggest components around building a business is one, usually via bootstrapping. And so bootstrapping meaning someone is building a business on little to nothing. That's probably a lot of the people who are on this presentation today. Most bootstrap companies rely on your personal income, your personal finances, savings, sweat equity, taking money that you made and reinvesting it, which is what I did to start Solid Ground Innovations, and really trying to keep costs very low and minimal. And then there is the other side of the coin, which is raising outside capital. And so if you are raising outside capital, you are essentially selling your idea or selling pieces of your company to an investor in exchange for ownership equity in your company. And so I'll talk a little bit about both and what my feelings are about both, which may be surprising to some of you depending on what aisle you sit on, but also want to hear from you and want to get your questions. So why bootstrap? I always say there's two reasons why we decide to bootstrap as business owners. Either you choose to or you have to. Now, when I started my first company, Solid Ground Innovations, it wasn't that I chose to or I had to. I didn't know any other way, right? And so for me, I was aligned to like the old school way of building a business. You know, you have idea, you have services, you're offering them, and you build it one by one. And so I built my company person by person. We were making some money. We reinvested that money back in the company, hired another person. We got another contract. We expanded upon our services one after the other. And so we were truly bootstrapped. And so I say you choose to or you have to. It's either one, you choose to because you don't want to report to anyone else. And as little people say, you do have to report to investors when you raise capital. You do have to report to your board when you raise capital. And some people just don't want to give up their company. They don't want to give up some of that freedom that is aligned with raising capital, or you have to, right? So the other part of that is that you have to because you don't have access to capital. Maybe you haven't built the traction that you need in order to raise capital for or outside investment for your company. But either way, we choose to bootstrap for many reasons. Now, when you look at the sides of bootstrapping versus raising capital and why people do it, you look at this natural versus artificial growth, right? And so I always say that if you're bootstrapping a company, you are growing organically by way of the work that you're putting in day in and day out. If you are raising capital, you're essentially buying growth, right? I know that people don't really like that word. People don't like artificial, but essentially if someone gives you $1 million tomorrow, what would you be able to do with that money and that capital, right? You would probably be able to get things that you weren't able to get before. You're probably able to leverage resources, paid advertising, marketing in a way that you've never been able to do before organically or day in and day out with just the resources that you have. That venture capital allows you to, in many ways, capture a market size and expand and land a lot faster if you were not bootstrapping. But, you know, there's the other side of things. You can still grow fast, even if you are bootstrapping. And some of you may not want to grow fast, right? You may be okay with growing slightly year over year, as long as you are able to see profit inside of your business and company. But one thing I always hone in on when bootstrapping and trying to grow faster as a business is that you have to have the right elements in place or it just doesn't work. Some of those things are hiring the right people. People often ask me, what are like some of the biggest mistakes I've made in business since I've been in business for over 10 years? And I always go back to having the right team, whether that is a team that you're a team of consultants or contractors, if you don't have full-time employees. Hiring the right people is so imperative to building out your business and getting you in the right position, because oftentimes as small business owners, we're trying to wear so many different hats. And if you're early on starting on, it can feel like you can't depend on anyone. And so hiring the right people, hiring the right contractors so that you can depend on is very important. Two, focus on established revenue resources. So when you're trying to grow faster, probably not the best best thing to do is to diversify your revenue sources. And so sometimes, because we see something attached to a check, that we'll take it on. We'll take on the opportunity. We'll take on this opportunity. But I try to tell companies, particularly not even just bootstrap companies, but also companies who raise capital, to try to really hone into what you do well and expand that revenue source versus trying to do so many other things at one time. 3, reduce your risk. And so if you're going to bootstrap, you have to reduce the risk inside of your company, right? You have to reduce your risk related to the supply chain. You have to reduce your risk related to, as I mentioned earlier, hiring, because hiring the wrong people can cost you money. And we know when you're bootstrapping your company that there is no thing more important than your cash flow. And so reducing risk is very important to growing your bootstrap company faster. You have to be adaptable, right? So that's the other thing about growing faster. You have to be able to adapt really quickly, and sometimes even like on the fly, to attract new business aligned to your services, or to be able to respond. And so if you're in government contracting, you know this, you have to, something comes through and you want to respond to it, you have to pretty much create those key resources and items to move you in the right direction. Focus on your customer experience. Sometimes I feel that this is something that we don't really hone in on, is like, what is your customer or your client experience, and what is their journey like? How do they feel about you? Are they ambassadors for you when they go out and need to refer people? The biggest thing you can do aligned to growing your company faster is create other evangelists of your business and what you are offering, because this is how you create referral systems. This is how people are talking about you without you having to be in the room, and they're talking about you in a good light. And I always ask people to answer this question, and that is, what do people say about you behind your back, right? And so think about that. What do people say about your business behind your back when you're not in the room? Because at the end of the day, that is what's going to help you grow faster, accelerate contract opportunities, those referrals that are coming in because you put in the work that you need to put in over the course of the past years, or if you're a new company, you're putting in that work today. Reinvest in yourself. So one thing with bootstrapping, we all know this, you have to take money, you're making money, you have to reinvest to continue to grow. Now, I know that people will often ask, what does that look like, right? So what does reinvesting in yourself look like? And not just yourself, but your business. In yourself, it's like, how do you continue to build your capabilities, right? And be the go-to person that someone calls for your services. And so investing in yourself by way of workshops, learning courses. Now, since we're virtual, sitting on webinars, how can you attain knowledge that's going to continue to really increase your value, not only as a business owner, but the value of your company? And as you learn more things, what you expect from your team members increases, and then they also begin to level up and want more for themselves and more for the company as a whole. Always think ahead, and that's the 7th key to like growing your company faster. Always being ready to go, always thinking ahead, always thinking how you can evolve ahead of those who are similarly competing in your space. So there are also other funding options when you think about bootstrapping. So when we think about raising capital, what are the traditional ways of raising capital? So crowdsourcing is something that has been really hitting the scenes and online a lot harder than it has over the past decade. I have several close colleagues and friends who have raised $1 million plus in crowdsourcing. And I've also had people who've tried and haven't been successful. Now, if you are crowdsourcing or crowdfunding, most people are utilizing an SEC regulated platform. An example of that is called Search Engine. A lot of my friends use Search Engine, Start Engine actually, to create their crowdfunding campaign. There, you don't just go on and start it today or tomorrow, or you set 2 weeks. You actually have to go through approval through the SEC. And then once they approve it, then you can raise funding. Usually that's capped at right at $1 million. And although you can start new crowdfunding campaigns, you're capped at $1 million. Now I have heard that the SEC is thinking about raising that limit for those to raise money under crowdfunding, but as of now, it's still capped. Now, there are some elements that you need to know about if you're going to go down the route of crowdfunding. One, you're going to be asking for a massive amount of individuals, usually at a minimum of $250, to invest in your business. You do that primarily to align to this concept called group economics. And so as a minority business owner myself, I am a believer of group economics. If we're going to move our community forward, if we're going to move our businesses forward, that we have to actually come together and work together to do this, right? And so crowdfunding in that instance is a way that of what we refer to as like group economics. We're pulling in a large number of people together and on one idea, one business, and trying to get them to that level of funding. And so for those companies and colleagues of mine who have been successful, many of them have already created some rapport around their business and their work ethic. And so going back to like investing in yourself, ensuring that people know who you are and they respect you is really important with crowdfunding, because people have already bought into you. And so now they're buying into the company or the idea that you are seeking funding around. And so this is very important when you think about starting a crowdfunding campaign and if you want it to be successful. Highly recommend a good friend of mine, Dawn Dixon. She's kind of like written a playbook on how to crowdfund successfully, and it's helped several other people raise $1 million or more through this group economics theory. Venture capital is the second. So I didn't crowdfund. I actually raised venture. And so I went through several rounds of venture, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. But venture capital essentially is a form of private equity and a type of financing that investors provide to startups, so startup companies and small businesses that they believe have a long-term growth potential. And so you may think, oh, well, my company isn't like a startup, right? We're more of a small business. However, the model of what venture capitalists are investing in today is changing. I actually just invested in a fund out of Atlanta, and they're actually investing in these small businesses who, if they just had a capital infusion of $1 million, could really help them expand, right? Could it help them expand in to acquire contracts, could help them expand their restaurants, whatever the case may be. They're not focused on these 20X startups who they're sinking, tens or 20s of millions of dollars in. They're actually focused on small businesses. And so there's so many new nuances to raising funding for your business, even if you are not your traditional startup type of company. That group is called Collab Capital. They're based in Atlanta. Then there's loans, right? So you can definitely go the traditional route and take out loans, which I'm sure anyone on this call knows the most traditional way of lending and how to secure loans. Now, particularly for minority businesses, it's not that easy to go get a loan. And I think that that's important. We understand that in ways that other people probably don't, who say, oh, well, just go get a loan for business. Let me tell you, I've created 2 businesses, and it has never been easy for me to just walk up into a bank and just get a loan. And I think that for minority businesses in particular, this is why we have sought out other means of funding our businesses that are not your traditional walk into a bank, JP Morgan Chase, and they'll write you a loan. They'll figure out how to get you a loan. And we know we have disproportionately been impacted by an unfair system of loans providing. And so to talk a little bit more about raising venture capital. And so, as I mentioned, there's various rounds of funding that you go through. I have raised a pre-seed, which we also call the angel round, a seed round, and in March, I closed on a Series A. For me, when I raised the pre-seed round, I had what we say is the minimal viable product, right? And so I had a minimal viable product, meaning that I had this idea, I had fleshed out some wireframes for the software that we were building, and we went out and raised $400,000 in a pre-seed round of high wealth individuals, right? So these are people that I knew, because remember, first generation college student, no inheritance, no connections, but I had begun to really network in my community. I began to get involved in, say, the Chamber of Commerce and some of the business chambers and get involved. And so people started knowing who I was. Also, because I had my first previous company, people that worked with me in different aspects of my career and through my business. And so when I went to raise a pre-seed round, I had created a rapport with the business community, and thus I had targets of individuals, and I say high wealth, but sometimes this isn't even high wealth. It's individuals who, can they give you $10,000? Can they give you $20,000 for your idea early in the company stage? From there, I raised a seed round of $2 million. So the seed round, definitely a lot more diligence. And so we talk about going through due diligence to actually raise capital. The seed round was from primarily what we consider early stage funds. And so these are early stage funds who are collectively bringing capital from limited partners. And so limited partners are those who invest in the fund, and then the fund invests into startups. And so fund sizes probably anywhere around 5 million to, now they have seed funds up to hundreds of millions of dollars. But they invest in these early, super early ideas who may have a little attraction, right? So a few customers, a proven concept. And so we raised $2 million at the seed round. And then recently an $8 million Series A, which is another level of due diligence, another level that you require to have in traction, right? So we have more customers, more fleshed out our software more, we're in market, right? So we were actively selling our product in market. And then of course our Series B, C, D, as you see some of the normal startups that you've heard about, like Airbnb and Uber, who've raised multiple rounds, even far beyond Series B. And so when we think about how startup funding works, this model, you may or may not be able to see it clearly. Some of the writing is small, but happy to share this deck out with anyone that is on this call today. And essentially it's just telling you how the flow of funding works, right? So from a hypothetical startup or business idea, one that could even go through acquisition, so being acquired by a larger company, or one that may even IPO, which stands for initial public offering. And so you're starting with your idea, right? And so that's what I talked about, starting with an idea, potentially raising a little bit of capital for it, whether that's $15,000, $200,000, or a couple $100,000. Also somewhere in there is the opportunity to meet what we know as a co-founder. So maybe you want to meet, you actually want someone to help you along this journey. As I mentioned, I'm a solo founder, but solo founders aren't necessarily the norm in this space. Most people have partners or founders because it's definitely something that is pushed in the industry. I think you can be successful as a solo founder. Will it be harder? 100%. And from there, you're raising capital. So your family and friends, also known as angels. I call them angels. Generally, this is called the family and friends round. I call them angels because my family and friends were not investing $400,000 in my company. But F&F is very common, seed round, Series A. And then at the bottom, you see how it's broken down across the individuals that you have relationships with. So it's you, potentially your co-founder, your friends and family, those angel investors, venture capitalists, your early employees. So your early employees also get a stake in your company that you set aside to really help them not only stay committed to the company, but to have them buy in to the company. And then anyone else, right? So anyone that you may engage with, say your board. And so when you're thinking about, if you are thinking about raising capital, most people ask me, how do you find the right investors, right? This is really important because as a startup founder and CEO, it's so important for you to know the different types of investors that are available before seeking funding. So everything from crowdfunding and SBA microloans, all these things matter, right? So you have to be sure to compile a list of investors prior to making a pitch so you can ensure you get the capital that best suits your needs. And then from there, you're going over into investor pitching. And so everything from keeping your presentation down to 20 minutes to keeping your slides to 10, I would say max 15, but if you could say between 10 and 15 slides, super important. It's clearly stating your objective, right? So do you have an elevator pitch? Can you pitch to potential investors really quickly and make them buy in fairly easy? Other steps, ensuring that you're storytelling. And a lot of times early on when you're raising capital, storytelling is so important because people buy into you first and then they buy into the business when you're raising capital. And so can you make people a believer of what you are selling? And so actions you can take now, right? So you can join Slack channels, Facebook groups, other agencies like SBA and BDA, they're providing resources. This is a resource that they're providing to you all to learn more about capital or bootstrapping, raising money or bootstrapping your company. You consider your business model and ability to assess customers without capital, right? And so again, I'm not highly selling capital. You have to raise capital because I enjoy bootstrapping my company. And I think that there is a place for everyone on both sides. There are sites you can visit that teach you everything about raising capital and even provides like term sheets, what your agreement should look like, firstround.com, Y Combinator. You could also visit my website for free downloadables. So you can sign up for a newsletter. I send out everything from like rate sheets, like my original rate sheet, my capability statements, the things that I use essentially to prepare for raising money, and then also those key things that I use to actually bootstrap my first company. And so definitely feel free to sign up for any of these things I'm recommending, but it costs you nothing to like join someone's newsletter. So I would take the time to do that. So I think we're right at 2:30, which leaves us about 15 minutes for Q&A. While they're getting any questions that may be coming from the audience sent over to me, some things that I just really want to hone in on related to bootstrapping versus raising capital is one, raising capital isn't for everyone, right? Not all companies and all businesses are designed for infusion of capital. If you think your company can exit 10, 20, 30, 40x, yes, it definitely is probably primed for capital. But there are other areas where you can access capital, such as crowdfunding or going to funds like Collab Capital, like I mentioned, who invest in smaller businesses. Thirdly, if you're going to bootstrap, the most important thing that you really want to hone in on is ensuring that your cash flow is positive, because if you don't have the right cash flow, you know that it will take your company under. And then secondly, honing in on the team and people that you put around you. And so these are key things that you always want to keep in mind when you're trying to make a decision to bootstrap or you're trying to make a decision to bring on additional capital. Let's see. Are we ready for questions?
Yes, Savitra, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, perfect. So we do have a few questions. I'll start with the one that most recent one that I see. We do only have about 5 minutes or so before we go into our next session, but that was I do want to start off by saying thank you, because that was such great information, such an inspiring story. So thank you so much. Our first question is, would you suggest considering your local city FIs for loans ahead of traditional banks?
Yes. So I have the fortunate pleasure of actually working with a few CDFIs now who are looking to give low interest loans to small businesses. And so if you can get a lower interest loan, right, with less stipulations around it to help you grow your business, it's literally designed for that. So if you can't access that type of capital, I would recommend it.
Okay, great. Another question that we have is, knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently in starting your business?
So knowing what I know now, when I was bootstrapping my first company, it was all about how do I access others' networks, right? And so some people, I tell people, like, what's a hack for you to acquire knowledge around as many people that you need to know who are actually like the thought leaders in the space? And so going to like your economic development offices, learning who the small business leader is there, learning who your public officials are, right? And so one key thing about public officials is that they know everybody. And so if you're starting off a business, you need to know everybody too. And so sitting down with them, with your local public officials, because they are there to serve you, right? And getting all the information you can from them early on, so you're as prepared as possible to really dive in to your business.
Okay. Great. And we do have one other question. Someone is asking if you could share that infographic that you used in your PowerPoint presentation.
Yes, I can. So I'll share my entire presentation. The infographic is really great. And it's also a link that can take you to a more broad explanation and breakdown of it. And so happy to share that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Savitra. Like I said, that was such an inspiring story. Hearing about how you started your business from the bottom and now you're here. It was so great. And my last thing is, do you have any other last words before we sign off for the day?
Yes, I named my second company Resilia for a reason, because if you're going to get into the world of owning your own business and running your own business, it is definitely a marathon and you have to be resilient. And so just keep going.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Savitra. You have a great rest of your day. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We do have one more session coming in after this one, which is our session on global importing. So stay tuned. A few more minutes. Thank you.